There are two different ways to handle interior elevations in Revit. And to illustrate this, I'd like to zoom in here where I have a room and I have an elevation tag inside of the room. If we double click where the arrow is for the elevation tag, it'll take us to the view that shows the interior elevation. Now, the two different ways that you can handle these kinds of situations is the first one is just using your drafting tools. And those drafting tools can be found underneath the Annotate tab, and those are such things as detail lines, your different filled regions, as well as your detail components. And you can draft those two-dimensional things along your wall or wherever it is you need to change those wall materials or those wall conditions. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, except there are a few drawbacks to it. One of the drawbacks is that there's no way to really take quantities or be able to do easy schedules based off of those items that you've just drawn in using line work. Another bad thing about it is if you try to do a 3D view inside of the space, or if you want to accomplish renderings or walkthroughs, you won't be able to do that very easily if you have a bunch of two-dimensional information drawn just inside of an elevation view. On the other hand, the positive aspect of it is it's by far the fastest way to detail in and draw exactly the way that you want your interior elevations to look. So you need to weigh what it is you want to do inside of the space whenever you're trying to put these things together. That being said, though, if you do find that you need to model these items, obviously you can use three-dimensional families to put those objects on walls, against walls, those sorts of things. In fact, that's actually what we're looking at here, where we have our casework and countertop. They're three-dimensional Revit families, and they're just in our view. But if we need to change the materials on the wall so that those display differently, there is a way to do it, but it can get just a little bit tricky. So we need to pay close attention to the little details as we're doing it. The first thing I want to do is come up here to the Modify tab on the ribbon. And then over here toward the left-hand side, there's an option that says Split Face. And I'd like to use that Split Face tool on this wall that makes up the back wall. Now, highlight over this back wall, and you'll know if this line, and this line turn blue, and it's a little hard to see on the screen, but they are turning blue here, that you have that back wall. And now just select when you have that picked. And what it's indicating is that we're getting ready to make a modification to the material associated with the face of this back wall. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is come up here to the rectangle command. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to come over to the very edge, click once, come over here, get this to be about 3 inches tall, come over here to the edge. We could always adjust it after the fact if it's just close, and then click again. For my own purposes and what I want to do, this is close enough. Now I'm going to click on the big green check mark. When I did this, it generated an error talking about a closed loop. Whenever we're working with these inside of Revit, there's sort of an odd thing about how this works. Sometimes these lines, whenever you come over here to the very, very edge of your wall surface, don't like to be split. They don't like to split those materials if it comes all the way over to the very, very edge. So there is a workaround to make it display correctly. In this case, I'm just going to click on the cancel button. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to pick right here on this purple line. And with it selected, I'm going to look at my keyboard and I'm going to click on the left arrow key. And you may have noticed it just nudged it over one tiny little spot. It's just a fraction of an inch. And I'm going to do the same thing over here on this end. Very, very tiny. If you zoom out, you'll notice that you can't even see it. Now, if we click on the big green check mark, you notice that it no longer gave us that error message. If you just pull the edge of where it is you're trying to split the material out, just a tiny bit away from the edge of your wall, then it should allow you to do it. Now, the next thing I'd like to do is actually place that material in here. And to do that, I need to come up and then right underneath where that split face tool was at, there's a paint tool. And if you select on the paint tool, you'll get a variety of different materials that are available to you. In this case, I'm going to come all the way down to the very bottom of the list, and I'm going to find this tile porcelain. Now that I've double clicked on it, I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to zoom in fairly tight, and I'm just going to click on sort of the bottom line of the split that we just created. Now, if you don't click in exactly the right location, you may get a condition like this where this material comes up and covers the entire wall instead of just that one tiny little area that you wanted to pick. And if that occurs, what you'll need to do is come in here to remove paint, click on that area, and then you'll see it go away. One of the hard things about whenever you're using this paint tool, and I just selected back on paint again, is getting the right spot where it is that you exactly want to select so that just that spot gets the material that you need it to get. As you can see in this case, it keeps trying to go through the back and then click on the wrong thing. I ended up picking sort of in the middle, and in this case, it ended up giving me the tile right in this area. In fact, you might need to click 2 or 3 times to get that material just in the right spot. After you finally do have it in the right spot, if you have the same kind of condition that I do where the entire wall is made out of that material, you can always come back in here, use that remove paint tool, and then just click inside of that area to get rid of the extra paint. And then you'll have that material just in that one spot. And it will schedule and it will tag. Now, you can already see the trouble that I was having getting that to actually place. That's one of the reasons why it's sometimes faster to just use your drafting tools, because if you try to model it in and cut these materials out, oftentimes you'll run into the conditions I was running into there, and it just takes longer to finish it up. So now I'm going to hit the escape key on my keyboard, and there's one other thing that I wanted to show, and that's underneath the Annotate tab on the ribbon. Over toward the right-hand side of the Annotate tab, there's an option here called Material Tag. And if you select on Material Tag, you can see that as we highlight over the different materials that make up these walls, it will give a listing of what that material is. In this case, it's listing off being gypsum wallboard. And I'll just click in order to place it there. And now I'll just place my material tag out here. If I do the same thing here, you'll notice that it does tag as being that porcelain tile. And we can have this come out like this. Click again in order to place it. I can click, and then I could pull and adjust these and get these to be lined up. The point of this being, and I just hit escape a couple of times to get out of the command, that you can tag and schedule and be able to see exactly what these materials are if you do take the time to model them out inside of your Revit elevation. Remember, there's always 2 different ways that you can go about doing these things. The first way is that you can just take your time and just draft it in. If you do drafting, it'll look good inside of an elevation view, and you can fairly quickly finish off the way that your interior elevations look. The only bad thing is that they won't render appropriately, and you won't be able to tell the way that they actually look. On the other hand, if you want your spaces to look good on the inside, render appropriately, and be able to see those materials, as well as potentially schedule those materials so that you can do quantity takeoffs of them, then you'll need to use your tools to come in, select on the wall surfaces, use the split face tool to cut out the exact area where you'd like to apply those materials to, then use your paint tool to paint those materials in and give you a true 3-dimensional look.